You know what true, deep tranquility feels like? It's when you stand on the beach, the sand cool beneath your bare feet, and watch the Atlantic stretch out, boundless and indifferent. The horizon blurs where the endless blue kisses the endless gray, and for a moment, just a fleeting, precious moment, you feel decades of hard work, of relentless pursuit, of profound loss and quiet pain. All of it just wash away with the tide. Like the ocean is cleansing your soul, one slow, deliberate breath at a time. I thought I'd found that peace. Right there, on the Outer Banks in the house I built with my own hands, piece by painstaking piece, for my late wife, Martha, and me. Our sanctuary. Our testament to a life well lived, a love well loved. I was wrong. Peace, I learned, isn't a state of being, it's an illusion. A fragile thing that must be protected, guarded with every last breath you have. And my daughter-in-law, Sarah, didn't just rattle that illusion. She outright tried to burn it down. She didn't realize, not then, that she just signed her own damn death warrant. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Mostly. The drive down from Richmond always felt like a journey back in time, a shedding of the city's concrete skin for the raw, untamed spirit of the coast. Interstate 64, then the slow, winding roads towards Nag's Head, eventually hitting the narrow, two-lane stretch that leads to my slice of heaven in Hatteras. Each mile peeled back a layer of the world, leaving me closer to myself. The past year, it had been a blur of grief. Martha, gone 5 years now. And then Mark, my boy, taken in a stupid, senseless car crash a year ago last spring. The kind of loss that leaves an ache so deep, so hollow, you wonder if you'll ever breathe right again. This trip, this quiet time alone in the house, was supposed to be my reset, my chance to finally sit with the ghosts, not run from them, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to make peace with the new, fractured version of Henry Anderson. Hank. Everyone calls me Hank. The old pickup truck, a dependable Ford F-150 with more miles than sense, rumbled along, the windows down, letting in the salty breeze that carried the promise of the ocean. My hands, calloused from 60 years of building. First as a Marine grunt building temporary fortifications in Nam, then as a contractor building some of the finest homes in Virginia, felt the familiar vibration of the steering wheel. My hair, what's left of it, was gray, thinning. My face, etched with sun and worry, probably looked every bit of 60, maybe more. Just an old man, right? A retired contractor living out his days. That's what they saw. That's what she saw. I remember turning onto the gravel road that led to the house, the familiar crunch beneath the tires, a sound that always made my heart settle. It was a modest place by Outer Banks standards. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, sitting high on stilts to brave the storms. Painted a cheerful robin's egg blue with white trim. We'd built it with love, Martha and I, every nail, every plank, every brush stroke. It was more than a house. It was a living scrapbook of our life. The deck where we'd share our morning coffee as the sun rose. The small garden Martha tended with such fierce devotion. The worn spot on the living room rug where Mark used to play with his toy trucks. But as I rounded the final bend, something felt off. There were cars. Not just one, but 2. A shiny black SUV, definitely not mine, and a beat-up minivan I vaguely recognized as belonging to Sarah, Mark's widow. My brow furrowed. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I hadn't needed to. This was my house. My sanctuary. A cold prickle of unease started to spread through my chest, chasing away the tranquility I'd so desperately sought. As I pulled up to the driveway, parking my truck behind the minivan, the scene solidified into something deeply unsettling. Beach towels hung over the railing, not neatly, but haphazardly draped. A collection of cheap plastic beach toys were scattered across the front steps. A pair of neon pink flip-flops, certainly not Martha's, lay discarded by the door. And then the music, loud, thumping, bass-heavy pop music, assaulting the quiet dignity of the house. It felt like a punch to the gut. This wasn't Martha's house anymore. Not for now. It was occupied, invaded. I cut the engine, the sudden silence of the truck cabin contrasting starkly with the racket spilling from the open windows of my home. My home, a place that now felt alien defiled. A knot tightened in my stomach. I took a deep breath, the salty air suddenly tasting bitter. I squared my shoulders, pushed open the truck door, and stepped out onto the gravel. The sun, once a comforting presence, now felt like a spotlight on an unwelcome stage. I was home, all right, but it seemed home wasn't ready for me. And neither, apparently, was my daughter-in-law. The front door, usually a solid barrier against the world, was propped wide open with a faded blue cooler, one Martha and I had picked up on our honeymoon. The audacity of it, using our cooler for such a thing, was the first tiny spark of something unfamiliar igniting in my chest. Not anger, not yet. More like a cold, analytical appraisal of a breach. I stepped inside. The music was even louder now, shaking the very bones of the house. The air, usually crisp with sea breeze and Martha's subtle scent of lavender potpourri, was thick with the cloying smell of cheap sunscreen, stale pizza, and something vaguely sweet and sickly that might have been a sugary cocktail. The living room, our sacred space, was a disaster zone. Empty chip bags, soda cans, and a half-eaten pizza box littered the coffee table. A child's muddy sneakers sat on Martha's antique embroidered footstool. Her carefully arranged seashell collection, a lifetime of memories, had been swept aside to make room for a stack of celebrity gossip magazines. My jaw tightened. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strangely small against the cacophony. A blonde head popped out from what used to be Mark's bedroom. My grandson, 16-year-old Ethan, headphones clamped over his ears, oblivious. He startled, pulling them off. "Grandpa Hank, what are you doing here?" His tone wasn't welcoming. It was accusatory. Before I could answer, a woman emerged from the kitchen, a half-empty wine glass in her hand. "Sarah, Mark's widow, my daughter-in-law." Her face, usually carefully made up, was flushed, her blonde hair messy. She was wearing one of Martha's old, oversized T-shirts, which, now that I thought about it, was probably the one she used to paint in. My vision narrowed. She stopped dead, her eyes widening in a mixture of surprise and something colder. Annoyance. "Hank, what on earth? I didn't know you were coming." Her voice was shrill, instantly grating on my nerves. I offered a small, polite smile. "Well, darling, is my house. I decided a change of scenery might do me some good." She scoffed, a truly ugly sound. "Your house. This is our vacation, Hank. The kids and I needed to get away after everything. I told you I'd be using it." She hadn't told me anything. She'd sent a text message 2 weeks ago, buried in a string of complaints about her financial woes, saying, "Thinking of taking the kids to the beach house soon. Hope that's okay." I'd ignored it. A hope isn't a request, and certainly not an assertion. I considered it rude and, frankly, manipulative, just like most of her communications since Mark passed. "I don't recall agreeing to anything, Sarah," I said, my voice even, despite the growing tremor in my hands. I clasped them behind my back. Old habit, marine corposture. In fact, I distinctly remember having plans for this exact week. Her eyes narrowed, and that's when the truly venomous words spilled out, unrestrained by any sense of propriety or respect. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Hank, why did this old ass drag himself here? There's no room for you. We're all settled in. We've got friends coming over later. Don't you have your own life? Somewhere else to be? Honestly, it's like you're trying to spoil everything, just like always. There's no room for you." The words hung in the air, echoing in the chaos of my desecrated home. My sanctuary. It wasn't just the words. It was the utter contempt in her voice, the dismissive wave of her hand, the way she looked at me like I was a piece of trash that had drifted ashore. Old ass. A searing pain shot through me, sharper than any wound I'd ever sustained in the jungles of Southeast Asia. It wasn't just for me. It was for Martha, whose memory was being trampled underfoot. It was for Mark, whose poor judgment in a spouse had allowed this woman to gain entry into our lives. For a moment, the grief for my son, fresh and raw, mingled with a burning humiliation. My vision swam, but then something else clicked into place. Something cold, hard, like a steel trap snapping shut. My years in the Corps, The decades spent navigating the cutthroat world of high-stakes construction, the quiet, almost ruthless pragmatism that had always been my secret weapon, all coalesced. I looked at her, truly looked at her, her entitled sneer, her careless posture, the way she held that wine glass like she owned the world, or at least my house. She saw a frail, grieving old man. I saw a target, a problem that needed solving. And I, Henry Hank Anderson, was a problem solver par excellence. My lips, without conscious thought, stretched into a slow, calm smile. It wasn't a genuine smile. It was the kind of smile my construction crews knew meant someone was about to learn a very expensive lesson. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted his prey. "It's all right, dear," I said, my voice impossibly soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the blaring music and the chaos of the room. My gaze held hers, unwavering, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not understanding, not yet, but perhaps a hint of unease. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it. I'll make other arrangements for tonight." I didn't wait for a response. I turned, my movements deliberate, and walked out the door, leaving the noise and the mess behind. As I stepped back onto the porch, I inhaled deeply, the fresh sea air a stark contrast to the stale, unpleasant odor inside. The wind whipped at my gray hair. I looked at my truck, then back at the house, a house I now felt compelled to reclaim, brick by painful brick, memory by precious memory. Getting back into the pickup, I started the engine. The roar of the old Ford felt like a battle cry. I backed out slowly, the tires crunching on the gravel, a sound of definite finality. The nearest motel, the Sandy Shoals Inn, was about 10 miles down the road. It was hardly a sanctuary, but it would serve. It would give me the quiet I needed, the quiet to think, to plan. As I drove, the sun dipping low over the Pamlico Sound, casting long, distorted shadows, my mind raced. "Old ass, huh?" I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. That old ass had faced down bullets, navigated corporate sharks, and built an empire from dirt and sweat. Sarah had no idea who she was talking to, no idea what she had just unleashed. She thought she dismissed an inconvenience. She'd poked a sleeping bear, and now that bear was wide awake and hungry for justice. The Sandy Shoals Inn was exactly what its name implied, sandy and a little shoaly. A faded neon sign flickered above the entrance, proclaiming vacancy with a missing C. The scent of chlorine and stale cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air of the lobby. It was a far cry from the serene comfort of my own home, a deliberate and almost poetic contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind. And it was perfect. This was a place for anonymous reflection, for shedding expectations. No one here knew Henry Anderson, the quiet contractor, the grieving widower, or the old ass's daughter-in-law had so casually dismissed. Here I was just a ghost and observer, and that suited my purposes perfectly. I checked in, paying cash. Didn't want a paper trail just yet. Not for this. The room was small, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and desperation. A single queen bed, a chipped dresser, a TV that probably hadn't been updated since the first Bush administration. I didn't care. I stripped off my dusty clothes, took a long, hot shower that did little to wash away the grit of the day, and then sat on the edge of the bed, the dim light from the bedside lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The rage, hot and sharp, had receded. In its place was a cold, surgical clarity. My mind, usually focused on the subtle nuances of wood grain or the structural integrity of a foundation, now replayed Sarah's words, her sneer, the casual way she'd claimed my home as her own. "No room for you." It was more than just an insult. It was a declaration, a complete and utter disrespect for everything I held dear, for Martha's memory, for Mark's legacy, for my own quiet dignity. Mark, my son, he'd always been a good kid, too gentle for his own good sometimes. He'd fallen hard for Sarah right out of college. She was vivacious, charming, ambitious. Or so he thought. I'd seen the glint in her eye, even then. The way she subtly steered conversations towards money, status, what Mark could provide. Martha had seen it too. We'd tried to warn him, gently at first, then more directly. But love, or whatever Mark felt for Sarah, was blind. He married her, and for the next 15 years, he worked himself to the bone, a rising star in corporate finance, to provide her with the lavish lifestyle she demanded. He was always trying to please her, always trying to keep up. I sometimes wondered if that pressure, that relentless pursuit of more, contributed to his fatigue, to that fatal moment behind the wheel. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. Sarah, on the other hand, had never lifted a finger. She saw herself as a socialite, a trophy wife, a curator of expensive tastes. She spent Mark's money faster than he could make it, accumulating debt, making impulse purchases, always needing the latest designer whatever. When Mark died, he left her a substantial life insurance policy and a decent portfolio, but even then, I knew it wouldn't last. Sarah's appetite for consumption was insatiable, and her understanding of financial prudence was non-existent. She believed money just appeared, and now, a year later, she was likely circling the drain, looking for a new source of sustenance. My beach house, apparently, was her next target. A free vacation, a temporary escape from the consequences of her own profligacy. I closed my eyes, picturing the house. The disarray, the disrespect. It wasn't just physical clutter, it was a psychological assault. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the quiet embodiment of Martha's spirit, of our shared dreams. To see it defiled like that, treated like a cheap motel, it felt like she was spitting on Martha's grave. And that, I realized, was unforgivable. My plan began to form, not as a burst of inspiration, but as a slow, deliberate tightening of gears. Like assembling a complex piece of machinery, each step precise, each component designed for a specific purpose. This wouldn't be about shouting or legal threats. Those were for amateurs. This would be about finesse, about leverage, about showing Sarah, in no uncertain terms, what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and an old man's quiet dignity for impotence. You think you could just waltz in and take what's mine, Sarah? I murmured to the empty motel room. You think you can dismiss me, disrespect the memory of the woman I loved, and get away with it? You have no idea, darling, just how much an old ass can still teach you about life. I pulled out my phone. First call, Richard Stone. Rich, my oldest friend, my consigliere, my former legal eagle before he swapped courtroom dramas for offshore fishing and bad golf. Rich had seen me through thick and thin, through Nam, through the lean years of starting my business, through Martha's illness. He knew how my mind worked. He also knew Sarah, and he shared my quiet disdain for her entitled ways. He answered on the second ring, his voice gruff. Hank, didn't expect to hear from you. Thought you were off to commune with the Pelicans. Plans changed, Rich, I said, my voice low, laced with an undertone that I knew he'd catch. It seems my pelicans have been usurped by a particularly aggressive seagull. A very noisy, messy seagull. There was a pause on the other end. Rich knew. He always knew. Sarah then. I had a feeling that might happen. She's been asking about the house a lot lately. Said she needed a break from her stressful life. Which, knowing Sarah, means she needed a free ride. Precisely, I confirmed. She's currently occupying my beach house, along with her 2 offspring and, I suspect, a few hangers-on. And she just informed me there's no room for me. Another pause. Then a low chuckle from Rich. No room, huh? Well, Hank, you know the law. It's your property, plain and simple. Getting her out isn't the issue. But knowing you, you're not looking for a simple eviction notice, are you? Eviction is for landlords, Rich, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. I'm looking for a lesson. A very memorable, very expensive lesson. I want her to understand the true cost of disrespect. The cost of entitlement. The cost of underestimating an old ass who built everything he has with his own 2 hands. My man, Rich said, a genuine warmth entering his voice. I figured as much. What can I do? You know I'm retired, but I still have a few old contacts. Property records? Financial background checks? Local ordinance enforcement? All the above, Rich, and more. I need to know everything. Every lien, every late payment, every unpaid parking ticket. Every rumor, every social slight she's made. I want to build a profile. Her strengths, her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities. Leave no stone unturned. Consider it done, Rich replied, his voice already taking on that familiar, sharp edge of a lawyer on the hunt. Give me 24 hours. I'll get the ball rolling. And Hank, don't do anything irreversible. Yet. Oh, I won't, Rich, I assured him, my smile widening. Not yet. I want this to be a slow burn. A psychological warfare. She's going to wish she'd never heard of the Outer Banks. She's going to wish she'd never seen my face. And when it's over, she'll understand that some battles aren't won with brute force, but with quiet, meticulous strategy. I hung up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The old military strategist in me, long dormant, was stirring. The construction magnate, accustomed to foreseeing every structural fault and planning every contingency, was now applying those skills to a different kind of blueprint. Sarah had declared war on my peace, on my past, on my very being. And I, Henry Anderson, was about to show her exactly what a 70-year-old Marine veteran, a self-made man, a grieving widower, and an old ass was truly capable of. This wasn't just about reclaiming my house. It was about reclaiming my narrative and making sure Sarah understood her place in it, which was, very clearly, nowhere near me. The next morning, after a truly terrible cup of motel coffee and a Danish that tasted suspiciously like cardboard, I drove back towards my house. Not to confront Sarah, not yet. That would be too direct, too amateurish. My aim was to observe, to gather intelligence, to understand the rhythm of her invasion. I parked the F-150 about a quarter mile down the road, tucked behind a small cluster of live oaks. From there, I had a clear view of the house, yet remained inconspicuous. The roar of the ocean was a constant backdrop, a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil in my mind. Sure enough, the minivan and the black SUV were still there. The front door was still propped open. A collection of deflated beach balls and tangled fishing nets lay strewn on the sand below the stilts. It looked less like a temporary vacation rental and more like a permanent encampment. Sarah, I noted, wasn't just using my house. She was living in it, with the casual disrespect of someone who truly believed it was hers by right. I watched for a couple of hours. Ethan, my grandson, emerged first, still plugged into headphones, tossing a frisbee half-heartedly towards the ocean, then giving up to stare at his phone. My granddaughter, Chloe, a year younger, appeared later, arguing loudly into her phone, apparently with a friend. No sign of Sarah yet. Lazy, entitled, just as I'd suspected. They were all on vacation, which in Sarah's lexicon meant someone else waits on me. While I watched my phone bust. It was Rich. Morning, Hank. Got some preliminary intel for you. And it's juicy. Lay it on me, Rich, I said, my gaze fixed on my desecrated property. First off, the house itself, he began. Title's clean, solely in your name. No claims, no joint tenancy. You could have the sheriff escort her off the property, no problem. But you want the slow burn, right? Absolutely. That's plan A. What else? All right. Sarai's finance. As predicted, a train wreck. Mark's life insurance payout? Mostly gone. Spent on a new luxury car she probably can't afford the payments on. Designer clothes, a wellness retreat in Aspen, and a couple of highly speculative, ill-advised investments her latest lifestyle guru convinced her were foolproof. She's got about 3 months' worth of expenses left in her liquid assets. Maybe 4 if she gets real thrifty, which, let's be honest, she won't. Her primary residence, the one Mark bought her in Westchester, has a second mortgage she took out 6 months ago, maxed out. Payments are due. And late. Credit score? Diving faster than a gannet on a fish. She's living on fumes, Hank. One wrong move, and she's bankrupt. A slow smile spread across my face. Excellent, Rich. Just excellent. She's a house of cards, then. A very pretty, very precarious house of cards, Rich agreed. Anything else? Oh, yeah. She's also late on a couple of utility bills for her Westchester place. Nothing major yet, but it shows a pattern. And she owes the HOA a hefty sum for some unapproved landscaping and noise violations. Perfect, I repeated, feeling a thrill of something cold and exhilarating. What about local connections? Anyone she might run to here? Check the local gossip mills. She's not exactly popular. tried to throw her weight around at the local grocery store a few times, complained about the provincial selections, tried to get freebies from a couple of restaurants. Word gets around in these small towns, Hank. She's seen as a snob. No real friends here. Just her kids, who are just as entitled. And I heard a rumor she's been trying to flirt with a local real estate agent, probably hoping for a hookup or a free place to stay. Pathetic, I muttered. So, no local safety net. None that matters, Rich confirmed. So, what's the first move, Maestro? I leaned back against the headrest, looking at my house, imagining Sarah oblivious inside. The first move, Rich, is to remind her, gently, that this is my house, not hers. And that means my rules. And my rules, for guests who aren't paying, include some inconveniences. Ah, Rich chuckled. The good old Hank Anderson inconvenience method. I like it. What kind of inconveniences are we talking about? Nothing illegal, nothing overtly hostile. Just bureaucratic entropy. A slow, grinding erosion of her comfort. You know how the utility companies work, Rich. A bill can get lost. A payment can be misapplied. Services can be temporarily interrupted for maintenance. Oh, I'm tracking, Rich said, clearly enjoying himself. So, the internet might go down? The cable? Maybe the water pressure gets a little erratic? Exactly. And the air conditioning might develop a glitch that requires extensive repair work at the most inconvenient times. And a few routine inspections from various service providers, plumbers, electricians, roofers, might be scheduled. All very polite, very professional. All demanding access, all day long. My house, my right to maintain it, after all. Brilliant, Hank. Truly brilliant. You're going to drive her absolutely nuts without laying a hand on her. That's the idea, I said, a grim satisfaction settling over me. She thinks she's on vacation. I'm going to show her what real stress feels like. And then, when she's at her breaking point, when she's desperate, that's when I'll make my move. That's when she'll learn about the price of an old ass's peace. We talked for a few more minutes, sketching out the initial stages of the plan. Rich would handle the lost utility payments and the maintenance scheduling. My old contacts in the local service industries, people I'd hired for years, would be more than willing to do me a favor. They knew me. They respected me. And they had no love for the likes of Sarah. I ended the call and put the phone away. The sun was climbing higher now, glinting off the ocean. A small wave of seagulls circled above, squawking their territorial claims. I watched them, thinking about Sarah. She was a seagull, all right. Loud, grasping, opportunistic. But I was the old osprey, perched high above, silent and patient. And the osprey always gets its prey, especially when that prey has foolishly wandered into its nest. The game was on, and Sarah, poor Sarah, hadn't even realized she was playing. The next morning dawned with a deceptive tranquility. The kind of day where the ocean whispers promises of peace, and the air hangs heavy with the scent of salt and possibility. I was up before the sun, as always, the quiet discipline of decades ingrained in my bones. After another subpar motel breakfast, I made a call. Sam, Hank Anderson here. How are you doing, son? Sam Brown was my junior partner, a sharp, ambitious young man I'd brought into the construction business almost 20 years ago. He was loyal, dependable, and knew how to keep his mouth shut. More importantly, he knew every single subcontractor, every independent contractor, every handyman worth their salt from Richmond down to the Outer Banks. He'd inherited the day-to-day operations when I stepped back, and he ran a tight ship. Hank, good to hear from you. Everything all right? I thought you were taking some time off. Sam's voice was genuinely friendly. I am, Sam. Or I was trying to. Look, I need a favor. Off the books, strictly personal. Anything for you, Hank. You know that. Good. I need a parade. A very polite, very professional parade of inspection teams to visit my beach house in Hatteras over the next few days. Plumbers, electricians, HVAC guys, roofers, pest control, you name it. All for routine maintenance and preventative inspections. The kind that require access to every room, every utility closet, every crawl space. And they need to be thorough, very, very thorough, taking notes, asking questions, making small, unsettling discoveries. Sam chuckled. A parade, huh? Sounds like you're trying to make someone's life a little inconvenient, Hank. Spill it. What's she done? I gave him a brief, clipped version of Sarah's intrusion, careful to keep the raw emotion out of my voice. She thinks she owns the place. Thinks I'm just a useless old relic. I aim to disabuse her of that notion. Permanently. Say no more, boss, Sam said, a new, determined edge in his voice. Consider it done. I'll call some of the best and most inquisitive crews I know. They'll be polite, professional, and absolutely relentless. They'll show up unannounced, give 30 minutes notice at most, and insist on completing their inspections regardless of who's home or what they're doing. And they'll take their sweet time doing it. What kind of discovery should they be looking for? Anything that hints at potential issues, I said, a grin finally breaking through. A loose pipe here, a flickering light there, a slight smell of mildew in the closet. Nothing major, mind you, just enough to suggest that the house is on the verge of needing massive, costly repairs. And they need to make sure Sarah specifically understands the gravity of these potential issues. Give her the estimates. High estimates. Got it, Sam said, his grin audible even over the phone. Consider her vacation officially over. Anything else? One more thing. My internet and cable are on my personal account. Rich is already working on having them interrupted for maintenance. But the house phone landline, that's still under my name too. Make sure that goes out. And if possible, get a local electrician to report a minor short in the main panel that occasionally causes some lights to flicker or even briefly go out. Nothing dangerous, just annoying, and hard to pin down. You, Hank, are a genius, Sam said, genuine admiration in his voice. All right, give me an hour, and the ball will be rolling. The first inspection team should be knocking on our door by mid-morning. I thanked him, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The wheels were in motion. This wasn't just about discomfort. It was about psychological warfare. It was about creating an atmosphere of constant, low-grade stress. An environment where Sarah would feel perpetually scrutinized, inconvenienced, and financially threatened. I spent the rest of the morning enjoying the peace of the motel room, such as it was, and doing some reading. I kept my phone close, however. Around 10:30 a.m., Rich called again. Okay, Hank. Internet and cable will be offline for upgrades by noon today. Expected restoration time? Indefinite. Landline phone will follow suit. Also, I've had a word with my contact at the utility company. She'll be receiving a few overdue notices for inflated water and electricity bills from the past couple of months for her house in Westchester. Just enough to cause a panic, but not enough to shut off service immediately. She'll have to make some calls, fight with customer service. Should be a real treat. You're a master, Rich, I said, picturing Sarah's reaction. Her frantic calls, her entitlement clashing with faceless bureaucracy. It was a beautiful symphony of discomfort. Just doing my part for justice, Hank, he replied. And I've leaked a few concerns to a couple of local real estate agents I know about potential structural issues with your property. Nothing concrete, just enough to make them wary if Sarah ever tries to sell or rent herself. A little whisper campaign, you know, keeps the resale value ambiguous. Excellent, I said, picturing Sarah's future, suddenly not as shiny and easy as she imagined. Later that afternoon, I drove past the house again, parking a little closer this time, blending in with a few other parked cars of tourists. The scene was different. No loud music. The front door was now closed. Good. Maybe the first wave of inspectors had already arrived. As I watched, a white van with Coastal Plumbing Solutions emblazoned on the side pulled up. Two burly men, carrying toolboxes, got out and strode purposefully towards the front door. They knocked. I couldn't hear the interaction, but I could see Sarah answer, her posture stiff, a look of annoyance already etched on her face. The plumbers gestured, probably explaining their routine inspection, and then, with a determined air, pushed past her, heading inside. A few minutes later, the lights on the porch flickered, then briefly went out, then came back on. A small, almost imperceptible tremor. I smiled. Sam's electrician had done his work. I stayed for another hour, observing. The plumbers emerged, shook their heads with exaggerated concern, handed Sarah a clipboard to sign, and left. She looked flustered, her hand running through her hair. Ethan and Chloe, who had been on the deck, now looked bored and restless, glancing at their phones which, I presumed, were now useless without internet. This was only the beginning. The slow drip, drip, drip of minor catastrophes. The constant, gnawing worry. The feeling that something was always wrong, always about to break. It was a far more effective weapon than any angry confrontation. It was insidious. It was psychological. It was the kind of long-game strategy that separated the men from the boys, the builders from the pretenders. Sarah was about to learn that an old ass, especially one who'd spent a lifetime building and breaking things, could be a very, very patient and very, very dangerous adversary. And she had no idea how deep this went. She was still thinking it was an inconvenience. I was just starting to lay the groundwork for a full-scale demolition of her comfortable, entitled world. The next few days were a masterclass in controlled chaos. I kept my distance, staying at the sandy shoals, receiving regular updates from Rich and Sam. Each report brought a grim satisfaction. "Hank, the HVAC guys just wrapped up their inspection at your place," Sam reported, his voice tinged with amusement. "Apparently, the old unit is on its last legs. Needs a full replacement before it completely gives out in the middle of a heat wave." Gave Sarah an estimate for 18 grand. She practically blew a gasket. "Good," I grunted. "Did they mention anything about the water heater?" "Oh, absolutely," Sam confirmed. Said it had calcium buildup that could lead to catastrophic failure. Another 7,000. And the minor short in the electrical panel? It's now intermittent but concerning. Told her a full rewiring of a few circuits might be necessary, and they'd have to cut power for a day or two to do it safely. Said they'd schedule it at her convenience, knowing full well she'd never agree. I smiled. It was all a perfectly orchestrated symphony of impending doom. Each problem was just plausible enough to be worrying, just expensive enough to be terrifying. Sarah, who likely couldn't tell a circuit breaker from a coffee maker, would be drowning in a sea of technical jargon and astronomical figures. The reports on her personal life were equally satisfying. She called the utility company in Westchester. Rich informed me, barely suppressing a laugh. Spent an hour on hold, then screamed at 3 different customer service reps about her erroneous bill. Ended up having to pay an expedited fee to avoid having her power cut off at her main residence. Said she was being targeted. The irony, Hank, is just beautiful. And the internet? I asked. Still down for upgrades, Rich said. And the landline, too. Her kids are apparently going stir-crazy. Chloe tried to use her phone's hotspot for streaming, but the signal out there is too weak for continuous usage. Ethan's been spotted skulking around the local coffee shop, trying to steal Wi-Fi. I pictured it. 2 spoiled teenagers cut off from their digital lifelines, trapped in a house that felt like it was falling apart, with a mother who was increasingly frazzled. The perfect recipe for internal conflict. And that was precisely what I wanted. Sarah's internal world, already brittle, was now under siege. I decided it was time for a personal visit. Not to confront, but to observe the effects firsthand, to let her know, subtly, that I was watching. The psychological pressure cooker needed a little stirring. I drove to the house in broad daylight, parking directly in the driveway. No stealth this time. I walked up to the front door, which was now thankfully closed, and knocked. Firmly. A few tense moments passed, then the door swung open. Sarah stood there, looking like she'd been dragged through a hedge backward. Her hair was still messy, but her eyes were bloodshot. She wore the same painting t-shirt. Gone was the arrogant smirk. In its place was a tight, stressed frown. "Hank, what do you want now?" she snapped, her voice thin and frayed. "Good morning, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, almost cheerful. I held up a small, insulated bag. "Just thought I'd bring over some fresh donuts from the local bakery. Heard they're quite good. Thought you and the kids might enjoy them." Her eyes flickered to the bag, then back to my face, suspicion warring with a flicker of something that might have been hunger. "Donuts? What's the catch?" I chuckled softly. "No catch, dear. Just being neighborly. And I wanted to check on the house. Heard from Sam that we've had a few unexpected issues pop up. The HVAC, the plumbing, the wiring. Seems like this old place is falling apart around your ears." Her face tightened. Falling apart? It's fine. It's just inconvenient. These people keep coming, making things up. They said the AC needs replacing. $18,000. Are you insane? Well, if Sam's crew said it, it's likely true, Sarah. They're the best. And what about the water heater? And that flickering light in the kitchen? Did they mention the intermittent short in the main panel? Sam was quite concerned about that one. Said a full rewire of some circuits might be needed. Her eyes widened, a frantic spark in them. A rewire? No one told me that. This is ridiculous. I can't even get online to look up a second opinion. The internet is down, the cable is out, the landline isn't working. It's like you're trying to make us miserable. Now, why would I do that, Sarah? I asked, my voice still gentle, my smile unwavering. These are just maintenance issues, dear. Happens with old houses. And the internet and cable? Just some network upgrades. Happens all the time. Bad timing, I suppose. I paused, letting my words hang in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Though I suppose it's hard to research things when you can't even get a stable connection, isn't it? Ethan and Chloe, drawn by the argument, now appeared behind Sarah, looking disgruntled. Grandpa Hank, can you fix the internet? Ethan whined. There's nothing to do here. Yeah, and Mom's been yelling at us all morning, Chloe added, glaring at Sarah. She says we're too loud, but what are we supposed to do? Sarah shot them a furious look. Ethan, Chloe, go back inside. Now. The kids mumbled, clearly annoyed, and retreated. Sarah turned back to me, her voice dropping to a hiss. This is what you want, isn't it? To make me look bad in front of my kids? To make our vacation a nightmare? No, Sarah, I said, my gaze hardening slightly. I want you to learn respect. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. This house, these memories, they mean something to me. More than you can possibly comprehend. And when you walk in here, treat it like a cheap hotel, and then tell me, the owner, that there's no room for me. Well, you poked a hornet's nest. And now the hornets are stinging. Her face went pale. The casual arrogance she once exuded was crumbling. She saw something in my eyes then, something cold and unyielding that transcended the simple words. She saw the veteran, the builder, the man who had faced down challenges far greater than her spoiled tantrums. What do you want? She finally whispered, her voice stripped of its earlier bravado. I want my piece back, Sarah, I said, my voice as soft as the rustle of the seagrass. And I want you to understand that some things are not for sale, not for rent, and certainly not for free. This house is mine. It always will be. And until you understand that, your stay here, and perhaps your life in general, will remain challenging. I offer her the bag of donuts. Her hand trembled as she took it. Enjoy your morning, dear, I said, my smile returning, as enigmatic as ever. And do let me know if those maintenance issues clear up. Though with an old house like this, you never really know, do you? I turned and walked back to my truck, leaving her standing there, a defeated figure clutching a bag of pastries, surrounded by the crumbling facade of her stolen vacation. The sound of the ocean, usually so soothing, now seemed to mock her. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove away, leaving her to stew in her growing nightmare. The hook was set. Now it was time to reel her in, slowly, painfully, until she was completely broken. The air in the sandy shoals and room felt lighter that evening. The confrontation, though brief and understated, had been a crucial turning point. I hadn't yelled, hadn't made overt threats, but I had, for the first time, allowed her to see a glimpse of the steel beneath the old-ass exterior. The fear in her eyes, the tremor in her hand as she took the donuts. These were indicators that the pressure was having its desired effect. She was no longer just annoyed. She was beginning to be genuinely afraid. I called Rich. She's rattled, Rich. Very rattled. And the kids are starting to turn on her. Excellent, Hank. I figure they would. Nothing shatters a spoiled kid's world faster than a dead Wi-Fi signal and a perpetually stressed-out parent. I've also had a thought. What about the septic tank? My eyebrows shot up. The septic tank? Rich, you're a genius. Hardly. Just thinking like a man who's seen a lot of things go wrong with old beach houses. These systems are usually designed for a family of 4, maybe 6 for short periods. With Sarah, her 2 kids, and whoever else she might have invited, plus the general lack of care. Well, it could be backed up, and a backed-up septic tank in a beach house. I prompted, is a biological disaster waiting to happen? Rich finished for me. And a very, very expensive, very, very unpleasant cleanup. Requires specialized crews, digging, possible replacement of parts. And it renders the house uninhabitable until fixed. Perfect, I said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across my face. Make the call, Rich, and make sure the inspection for the septic tank is scheduled for, let's say, tomorrow morning. Unannounced, of course. And ensure they find a major blockage that requires immediate attention. Rich chuckled. Consider done. Anything else on your mind, Hank? Just an idle thought. Have you heard anything about Sarah trying to sell any of Mark's old things? Valuables? Antiques? He had a small collection of first edition books and some rather nice paintings. Interesting you ask, Rich replied, a slight change in his tone. I did hear a whisper. She's been sniffing around a few local antique dealers and a consignment shop in Nag's Head. Apparently, she tried to offload a couple of family heirlooms for quick cash. The dealers passed, so they seemed distasteful to be selling, given the circumstances. And she definitely didn't own them in her own right. Most of Mark's personal collection was specifically bequeathed to his children in his will, with a life interest for her, but not outright ownership for sale. My blood ran cold. Mark's will. I hadn't thought about it in a while. It was all handled by a trust attorney after he passed. But I knew Mark, and I knew how meticulous he was about his prized possessions. He loved those books, and his children were minors. Sarah was merely the custodian of their inheritance until they came of age. To sell them now, for her own frivolous needs, would be a blatant breach of fiduciary duty. A betrayal. Rich, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Give me a copy of Mark's will. Specifically, the clauses about his personal effects and the children's inheritance. And find out if any of those antique dealers actually bought anything from her. Will do, Hank. This is getting interesting. It's about to get a lot more interesting, I promised. Sarah thinks she's just dealing with a grumpy old man. She's about to discover she's dealing with the executor of her late husband's true legacy. And if she's been stealing from her own kids, she's crossed a line that even I won't forgive. The next morning, as expected, the septic tank crew arrived. I drove by at a discreet distance, just to confirm. A large truck, complete with hoses and a specialized team, was parked in my driveway. Sarah was standing outside, gesticulating wildly, her face a mask of horror. The crew, impervious, simply went about their messy business. The sight, the smell, the sheer disruption of it all. It was magnificent. The house was, for all intents and purposes, now uninhabitable. No working bathrooms, no running water without risk of contamination. Her vacation had officially devolved into a full-blown biohazard. Later that afternoon, Rich called again. His voice was grim. Hank, I've got the will. And you were right. Mark was explicit. His entire collection of first edition American literature, his grandfather's antique clock, and the landscape paintings by local artists, all specifically bequeathed to Ethan and Chloe to be held in trust until their 25th birthdays. Sarah was granted a life interest, meaning she could enjoy them, but not sell or encumber them without a court order, which she certainly didn't get. And the consignment shops? I asked, my heart pounding with a cold, slow rhythm. This is where it gets ugly, Hank. She tried to sell 2 of the smaller paintings to a gallery owner named Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson, knowing Mark's collection was famous locally, smelled a rat. She refused to buy them, but she took pictures. Said Sarah seemed desperate, almost frantic. And she confirmed Sarah specifically mentioned needing cash for bills. She tried to sell her own children's inheritance. I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was about outright theft, about a complete moral bankruptcy that transcended mere entitlement. Mark, my gentle Mark, will be spinning in his grave. That's a felony, Hank, Rich stated, his lawyer's instinct kicking in. Breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, potentially fraud, especially if she tried to pass them off as her own property. That's a jail sentence, Hank. A very serious one. Jail, I murmured, staring out at the gray, indifferent ocean. The word settled heavily in the air. No, not jail. That's too simple, too clean. Jail removes her from the equation. It doesn't make her face what she's done. It doesn't make her understand. What are you thinking, Hank? Rich asked, a note of caution in his voice. He knew me well enough to understand that my version of justice was often unconventional. I'm thinking, Rich, that Sarah has completely underestimated the power of an old ass who has nothing left to lose but his dignity. She's been playing a game of chicken, thinking I'd blink first. She's wrong. She's just given me the ultimate leverage, and I intend to use it, not to put her behind bars, but to expose her, to strip away every last shred of her carefully constructed facade. I want her to lose everything, Rich. Not just the house. Everything she values. Her status, her pride, her comfortable illusion of a life. I took a deep breath, the salt air filling my lungs, stealing my resolve. I want you to draft a formal letter, Rich. Not to Sarah, to the trust attorney who handled Mark's estate. Lay out everything. Her attempt to sell the inherited items. The evidence from Mrs. Henderson. The clear breach of the will. Demand a full audit of the trust and a legal review of her conduct as a guardian. Make it airtight. Make it undeniable. And then, once it's signed and sent, I want you to make a few anonymous calls. To her bridge club, to the PTA at her kids' school, to a few of her Westchester friends. Let the rumors begin. Let her feel the weight of social ostracization, the public shame. You're going for the jugular, Hank, Rich said, his voice a mix of awe and trepidation. She went for mine, Rich. She tried to desecrate my sacred space, steal from my dead son's memory, and cheat my grandchildren. This isn't just about a beach house anymore. This is about justice, about the cold, hard, unyielding truth. She called me an old ass. It's time I showed her just how much an old ass can kick. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The ocean roared, a constant primal sound. I felt a strange sense of clarity, of purpose. My grief for Mark, for Martha, still a dull ache, was now channeled into something sharp, precise, and utterly ruthless. Sarah thought she'd inflicted a minor annoyance. She had no idea she'd unleashed a force of nature. And now, that force was coming for her. The next morning, armed with Rich's expertly drafted letter to the trust attorney, a document that read less like a complaint and more like a carefully constructed legal indictment, I initiated the next phase. The letter, sent via certified mail, was a silent bomb, ticking. I knew the trust attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed, wouldn't take lightly to a potential felony being committed under her watch. The wheels of professional justice, slow but inexorable, were beginning to turn. But legal wheels were too slow for my immediate satisfaction. I wanted Sarah to feel the squeeze now, and I wanted her to feel it where it hurt most, her precious social standing. Rich, I said, a few hours after sending the letter, remember that anonymous call idea? It's time. I want the information about Sarah trying to sell Mark's paintings and her current financial difficulties to become common knowledge in her circle. The bridge club, her fancy Westchester friends, the PDA, maybe even a few of those lifestyle gurus she used to hang out with. Nothing direct, nothing from me. Just a well-placed whisper. A concerned friend reaching out. You want to spread gossip, Hank? Rich asked, a hint of unease in his voice. That's a bit beneath you, isn't it? Beneath me? I scoffed. Rich, she called me an old ass and tried to steal from my grandchildren. There is no beneath me anymore. This isn't about my dignity. It's about hers. Or lack thereof. She thrives on appearances, on being seen as the grieving, elegant widow, managing her affairs with grace. I want to shatter that illusion. I want her to be ostracized, to feel the sting of judgment from the very people whose opinions she values most. Rich sighed, but I knew he'd do it. He might not like the method, but he understood the intent. All right, Hank. I know a few people who know a few people. Concerned whispers will begin circulating by the end of the day. Brace yourself for some fireworks. I'm ready, I affirmed. And one more thing. I need one final inspection at the house. A complete, thorough, undeniable assessment of the septic tank situation. The kind that leaves no doubt about the severity, the cost, and the immediate uninhabitable status of the property. Make sure they give her a printed report, signed and sealed, that she can't argue with. You really want to hammer that home, don't you? Rich noted. I want her to know, unequivocally, that her vacation is over, I said, and that her comfortable illusion of control, her comfortable life, is about to follow suit. The septic tank report arrived that afternoon, delivered by a solemn-faced technician who explained the catastrophic failure in painstaking detail to a visibly distraught Sarah. I learned this from Sam, who had dispatched a discreet observer, one of his quieter crew members, to ensure the message was received loud and clear. According to the report, the house would require extensive work, involving digging up a significant portion of the yard, replacing several hundred feet of old pipes, and potentially a new septic field. Estimated cost: a cool $25,000 minimum, and the house would be completely unusable for at least 2 weeks, perhaps more. The final nail in the coffin of her beach retreat. I gave Sarah 2 hours to digest this information. Then I called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, devoid of its usual arrogant edge. "Hank, what do you want?" "Good evening, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, almost sympathetic. "I heard about the septic tank. A terrible shame. Truly, you must be quite distressed." "Distressed? Hank, it's a disaster. The house is ruined. We can't even use the bathrooms. We have to leave, and they want $25,000 to fix it. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money?" "Indeed," I said, letting her panic simmer. "It is quite a sum, especially with all your other financial obligations, and those new bills from Westchester. I understand they've been quite a headache for you." A sharp intake of breath on her end. How do you know about that?" "Sarah, you'd be surprised what an old ass can learn when he puts his mind to it," I said, my voice dropping slightly, imbued with a hint of genuine menace. "I also heard about your recent attempts to sell some of Mark's paintings, the ones he specifically bequeathed to Ethan and Chloe in his will. The ones you had no legal right to sell. To Mrs. Henderson, wasn't it? From the Henderson Gallery." Silence. A profound, terrified silence. I could almost hear her world crashing down around her. The air crackled with her unspoken fear. "That's a felony, Sarah," I continued, my voice measured, each word a hammer blow. "A serious breach of trust. Embezzlement. Taking from your own children. And I, as a concerned grandparent, have already informed the trust attorney of your actions. Evelyn Reed. I'm sure you remember her. She's currently reviewing your conduct as a guardian, and frankly, she's not pleased." "No," she gasped a desperate, strangled sound. "No, Hank, you can't. You wouldn't. That's crazy. I needed some cash. It wasn't stealing. I was going to replace them." "Were you, Sarah?" I asked, my voice chillingly calm. "Or were you just trying to pay for your frivolous lifestyle with your children's inheritance? The same frivolous lifestyle that's made you too broke to afford your own home, forcing you to squat in mine? The same frivolous lifestyle that leads you to call me an old ass and disrespect the very man who provided you with everything." "Please, Hank," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. I'll leave. I'll leave right now. I promise. Just don't tell anyone else. Don't ruin me." "Ruin you, Sarah?" I scoffed. "You ruined yourself. You did this. Every single decision you made, every act of disrespect, every dishonest move. You thought you were so clever, so entitled. You thought you could walk all over people. You thought an old ass was easy prey. You were wrong." I paused, letting her desperation build. "Here's what's going to happen, Sarah. You and your children are to vacate my property immediately. Tonight, you will leave the house in the condition you found it, which, considering the current state of the septic system, means you'll probably need to stay in a hotel. At your expense, of course. You will take nothing that doesn't belong to you, and you will never, ever set foot on my property again. Do you understand?" Yes, I understand. We'll leave. Please, just about the trust." She stammered. "As for the trust," I continued, my voice firm, "the audit will proceed. Your attempts to sell the paintings will be on record. And if you ever try to pull a stunt like that again, or if you ever try to harm my grandchildren's inheritance, I will ensure you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison. I will make it my life's mission. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, she whimpered. Good. Now, here's the final piece of advice, Sarah, I said, my voice softening, but with a steel edge. Learn humility. Learn respect. Learn that the world doesn't owe you anything. And next time you think about calling someone an old ass, remember that some old asses have very long memories, very powerful friends, and absolutely no compunction about tearing down everything you hold dear. Enjoy your reevaluation of life. I hung up, a profound sense of closure settling over me. There was no joy, no triumph, just a quiet, deep satisfaction. Justice, in its own slow, brutal way, had been served. Sarah's life, as she knew it, was effectively over. Her social circle would soon be buzzing with the juicy details of her financial ruin and her betrayal of her children. The trust would be under scrutiny, limiting her access to any remaining funds. And she would be homeless, at least temporarily, forced to scramble to truly understand what it meant to live without the safety net she'd always taken for granted. I walked out onto the motel's tiny balcony, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, the ocean's roar a constant, primal sound. It was the sound of nature, indifferent and unforgiving, just like life itself. I thought of Martha, of Mark. I hoped they would approve. My sanctuary had been defiled, but now it would be cleansed. And Sarah, the aggressive seagull, had been taught a lesson she would never forget. A lesson about the true power of an old ass with nothing left to lose. The house was empty, eerily silent. I arrived the next morning, not in my F-150, but in a small rental car, just another tourist blending into the early morning beach traffic. I parked a few blocks away and walked, feeling the crisp, salty air on my face. The sun was just beginning to climb, casting long, peaceful shadows over the sand dunes. There was a sense of calm returning to the neighborhood, a quiet dignity that had been absent for days. As I approached the house, I saw the undeniable proof of her hasty departure. The minivan and the black SUV were gone. The garbage cans, overflowing with fast food wrappers and empty bottles, sat forlornly by the curb. A couple of cheap plastic beach chairs were left overturned on the porch. A forgotten child's sandal lay tangled in the sea grass by the steps. It wasn't exactly clean, but it was empty. The invading force had retreated. I unlocked the front door, the familiar click of the tumblers a comforting sound. The air inside was still heavy with a lingering scent of stale pizza and artificial grape soda, a testament to the chaos that had reigned. But it was quiet. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant murmur of the ocean. I walked through the living room, my gaze sweeping over the scene. The coffee table was still littered, but at least the gossip magazines were gone. The mud from Ethan's shoes was still on Martha's footstool. The seashell collection was still disturbed. It was a mess, yes, but it was my mess now. A mess I could fix. A mess I could reclaim. There was no sense of triumph, no surge of vindictive glee. Just a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, and a quiet satisfaction that a grave injustice had been righted. The battle was over. The territory was mine again. My phone buzzed. It was Rich. Morning, Hank. Heard she fled. Good work. She did. I confirmed, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. The house is empty. Now comes the cleanup. Figured as much. Just wanted to update you on the other end of things. Evelyn Reed, the trust attorney? She's on it. Contacted Sarah this morning. Apparently, Sarah was less than cooperative. Evelyn's moving forward with a full forensic audit of the trust. She's also informed Sarah that any further attempt to liquidate assets will be met with a direct court injunction and a report to the authorities. She's essentially stripped Sarah of any real control over the kids' inheritance. Sarah can't even get to the capital gains without a judge's permission. Good, I repeated. That's good. And the whispers? Rich chuckled, a genuine, hearty sound this time. Oh, they're spreading like wildfire, Hank. Grieving widow attempts to sell children's heirlooms for gambling debts. Socialite loses her shirt and her manners. Poor Mark, what was he thinking? Her social calendar is officially wiped clean. She tried to attend her bridge game yesterday, and apparently, no one would make eye contact with her. One of her friends even pointedly asked her if she'd seen any good real estate deals lately, knowing full well about her situation. She left in tears. Karma, I stated. She reaped what she sowed. Indeed. So what's next for you, Hank? Head back to Richmond? No, I said, looking around the living room, already picturing Martha's delicate hands arranging her shells. I am staying. This place needs a proper cleansing, and I need to be here for it. Makes sense. Need any help with the septic? I know a guy who can get a crew there today, cheap and discreet. That would be appreciated, Rich. Thank you. And thank you for everything. You're a good friend. Anytime, Hank. Just try not to get into any more old-ass altercations for a while, all right? I hung up, a small, wry smile touching my lips. No promises there, Rich. Some things, some fundamental principles were worth fighting for. I started to clean, methodically. It was a ritual, a form of active meditation. I picked up the discarded chip bags, the soda cans. I wiped down the sticky surfaces. I carefully moved Martha's footstool, scrubbing away the muddy stains. Each action was an act of reclamation, a quiet assertion of ownership and memory. Later that afternoon, the septic repair crew arrived. Sam had made good on his promise. They were efficient, respectful, and worked quickly. The unpleasant smell was soon replaced by the fresh earthiness of churned soil. I watched them work, sipping a cup of coffee I'd brewed in Martha's old percolator. The taste, strong and familiar, was a comfort. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the Atlantic, I found myself on the back deck, the one Martha and I had built together. The ocean roared, a constant primal sound, but now it was a sound of peace, not turmoil. I looked out at the vast expanse of blue, the waves crashing rhythmically on the shore. I thought about Sarah, her desperation, her humiliation. I didn't feel pity. I felt a profound sense of closure. She had sought to diminish me, to erase my presence, to steal my peace. And in doing so, she had unwittingly forced me to confront a part of myself I hadn't needed in years. The strategist, the fighter, the man who knew how to build an empire and, if necessary, tear down another's. This wasn't just about a beach house anymore. It was about defining boundaries, about honoring memory, about upholding a personal code of justice. I was an old man, yes. My body ached, my hair was gray, and I carried the heavy weight of loss. But underneath it all, the fire still burned. The will to protect what was mine, to fight for what was right, to ensure that decency and respect, however old-fashioned they might seem, still held sway. I remembered her words, old ass. I chuckled softly. Maybe I was. But this old ass had survived jungles, boardrooms, and personal tragedies. And he'd just taken down a predator far more dangerous than any wild animal. He'd shown her that true strength wasn't about youth or beauty or material wealth. It was about conviction, about unwavering resolve, and about the quiet, often underestimated power of a man who knows exactly who he is and what he stands for. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The stars began to appear, one by one, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. My house, my sanctuary, was quiet again, cleansed, reclaimed. I finally felt that true, deep tranquility return. It wasn't an illusion this time. It was a peace earned, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that no one, not ever again, would dare to disturb it.